Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. In this video I wanted to sit down and talk about trauma. Trauma and negative emotions surrounding Avery's event and her conditions, and I always knew I wanted to film this video after I shared her journey and kind of what happened. How she got her cardiac arrest. If you are new to my channel, hi, I am Chrissy, I'm a mum of 3, and my youngest daughter Avery, who is almost 2, did suffer a cardiac arrest when she was 3 days old and subsequently now has lifelong conditions such as cerebral palsy, dystonia. I think every parent that goes through this type of event, whether that be at birth or after birth, will always experience a lot of negative emotions, a lot of trauma, and I always feel a little bit nervous talking about things like this, especially so openly on the internet, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist. I am incredibly underqualified to even be talking about it, but what I want to do is share my own experience, share the kind of journey I've gone through, where I'm at now, how I've coped, the mechanisms that I have found that have helped. And sometimes I feel like just talking about it can really help others. I know that when I was very early on in my journey, I joined a lot of Facebook groups that were all tailored around HIE and children with feeding tubes, children with disabilities, reading other people's stories, reading other people's questions, being able to answer people's questions because I had experienced something. It really helped. It helped knowing that things I had learned could help other people. It helped listening to other people's stories, knowing that I'm not alone, and ultimately I think that is just why I wanted to sit down and film this video. Trauma is a huge part of a parent's emotions who has a child with HIE, and I think it is a massive hurdle that I don't want to say overcome, because I feel like you can't really overcome it, but it's a massive journey that you need to navigate. Like I said, I don't think it's something that you can get closure on, it's not, but you do learn over time how to cope with the emotions, how to cope alongside those negative emotions, because let's be real, you're never going to feel 100% okay about it. What I will say here at the start is that if you are in this kind of situation and you do feel like you're struggling, I definitely recommend seeking professional help. I mean, I'm one to talk here because I have not yet, but I am in the process. It is my goal for 2023 to seek some professional help and learn some better coping mechanisms to address the trauma, address the negative emotions. If you're not new to my channel, you will have seen that we go to Little Harbour sometimes, which is a children's hospice. They do have a kind of therapy side of the service that I am trying to get involved with at the moment. So it is a plan, it is in the works, but I definitely think that it is something that you should do if you feel like you are struggling with the negative emotions, because they can be very, very overwhelming at times. So a lot of you guys in the comments say that I cope really, really well on a day-to-day basis, and I do feel like I cope really, really well. There was a time when I certainly didn't, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I do feel like I've gotten to a point where I can function well. I can function well and I can be happy, and I don't feel sad all the time, and I'm okay, and I think that is a really good place to be. It has taken a lot of time. Like I said, Avery is almost 2 and I still have bad days, but I do think that I have found a few strategies and a few different ways that have definitely helped. One of them definitely being the support groups, another one being this YouTube channel. It definitely helped me to be able to open up and share our journey, share our experiences, and read your guys' comments. I know there's a lot of you that are in similar situations, on similar journeys, and just connecting with you guys through this channel has really helped. So a while back, it was quite a while back now, I'm talking maybe a year ago, maybe a bit less, I did a course, and the course had nothing to do with HIE or trauma in general, but they talked about a loss cycle, and I'm going to put an image somewhere on the screen here about what it looked like. Now this is one that I've drawn, so it's not exactly the same, but when I saw that, it immediately felt familiar. I felt like that loss cycle could definitely be a trauma cycle, I suppose, and in a way trauma is loss, although I haven't really lost anything. And I think parents with children that have HIE will definitely be able to relate to this. Even though I haven't lost anything, Avery is still here. She brings me so much joy every day, and I'm so very lucky. I still feel like I have grieved. I grieve for what she could have had. I grieve for what she could have done. I grieve for that little girl before the cardiac arrest, and I'm getting welling up a little bit because, like I said, I'm not completely over it. There are still things that trigger me, but I think you do grieve, and it's okay to grieve. It doesn't mean that you love your child any less. I love Avery to pieces, and most parents say I wouldn't change my child for the world. And no, I couldn't imagine my life without Avery in it, exactly how she is. But in the same sense, of course, just like every other parent in this situation, I wish she didn't have to suffer. I wish she didn't have to go through what she went through. I wish she'd never had the cardiac arrest. I wish she was healthy and well and developed well, and I wish her life would be easier. But that doesn't mean to say that I don't wish she wasn't the way she is. I don't wish she isn't exactly who she is, because she is perfect exactly the way she is. But I don't think it's wrong for parents to grieve for what they've lost and to grieve for what their child has lost. So getting back to the cycle, I don't think it's as straightforward as it looks. It is obviously a very clear curve, and I think generally you do follow the curve. I feel like I have followed that curve, but in the same sense, I do think you can go backwards on this curve, you can go forwards. It's a rocky road, and a lot of the time it is 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and then sometimes you can feel much better. But talking about the very beginning of it, denial and shock, I feel like these are the emotions that I felt mostly when Avery was in hospital. Avery was in hospital for about 5 weeks, and I did feel shocked. I felt like I was in shock, especially in the very early days when she was in ICU, and even before that, even before the ICU, when the paramedics were still working on her. No, she's gonna be fine, she's gonna be fine, she's gonna wake up and it'll be like all of this never happened. It is normal to kind of feel that deny, because your body is going into shock, because it is an incredibly traumatic event. Then we move on to anger, and I felt it, and I mean even now there's times that I still feel it. Even though anger is right at the beginning of the cycle, there's times even now that I feel angry and I want someone to blame, and at the time I blamed myself. I was angry at myself, and it kind of gives you a little bit of adrenaline to kind of keep pushing forward. And in a way I needed that adrenaline, but it was just coming from a really unhealthy place. And then we move down into bargaining, and it is kind of, you're plummeting. The adrenaline is starting to fade away from that anger, and you start to hit those emotions like, why me? Why my child? And I feel like this is kind of the point for me where I secluded myself. I didn't want to put myself in any social situations. I didn't want to hear the questions that people were going to ask me. I didn't want to hear people's opinions about Avery, because you have all sorts of opinions. It's a hard place to be in. Like I said, I really secluded myself, especially since a lot of people in my social circle were all having babies or had recently had babies. And as much as I was happy for them, and in my heart that I knew I was happy for them, I felt really sad. I felt angry. Why Avery? Why did Avery deserve this? Why doesn't Avery deserve to develop properly and be healthy? Why did this happen to my child? And I want to go a little bit more into this because I think there's a lot of parents that feel this way but almost feel a little bit too ashamed to talk about it. I know this because of the support groups on Facebook I'm on, I mentioned earlier. I went through a phase where I didn't want to be around anyone else's children. I didn't want to be around anyone that was pregnant. I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to see it. I wanted to completely shield myself from it because it hurt. It really hurt, which is really sad because around that time one of my closest friends was pregnant, and that was really difficult for me because I was so happy for her and I felt so ashamed and guilty for feeling the way I felt. But I did sit down and I spoke to her a little bit about the way I felt, and of course she completely understood, but she knew and I knew that that in no way meant that I had any ill feeling, that I wasn't happy for her. It's a really difficult emotion to navigate, but I really did want to touch upon it because I know there's so many parents that feel the same, that have family members that have had a baby, but that baby is perfectly healthy, and that doesn't mean that, you know, you're not 100% happy for them. It doesn't make it feel any better. It doesn't make you feel any less sad. As a matter of fact, it makes you feel even more sad because that is what you should have had. That is what your baby should have had. Yeah, I've got no other way to say it other than it is really difficult. But if you have felt like that, then it is totally normal. I don't think you should be ashamed by it because those feelings are completely relevant. They're completely valid and you have absolutely every right to feel that way. It doesn't make you a bad person. Then we move on to depression, and I definitely feel like I hit a low point. It was within Avery's first year. My mum and Josh both actually had to kind of sit down and talk to me, and I just broke down. I cried my eyes out. I felt sad about everything. I felt as though Avery was always suffering. At this point she was crying about 70% of the time, and we were having a really hard time finding out what would make her happy. It was a really low point, and I just felt as though life wouldn't get better. Life was really bad, and along with all those emotions comes a huge amount of guilt, because whenever you have a negative emotion that is directly as a result of something that happened to your child or the way your child is, of course you're going to be guilty. You're going to feel really guilty for feeling that way, because you shouldn't feel negative emotions toward your child, and not toward your child as in, you know, they're directly aimed at the child. That's not what I mean. I've never felt negative emotions directly towards Avery, but surrounding Avery's conditions, and you do feel guilty. And again, that is something that is very normal. It's still with me. I still feel guilty a lot of the time, but in the same sense, I also know now that it wouldn't be normal if I didn't have some negative emotions, if I didn't feel sad or angry or depressed at times, because what happened to Avery isn't a good thing. You know, it was horrible, it was traumatic, and no one ever deserves to go through something like that. So it just stands to reason that there's always going to be negative emotions and you shouldn't feel guilty for them. Now, when I hit this low point, like I said, my mum and Josh, my husband, they sat me down and we kind of talked about the things we could do to try and lift my mood a little bit. They asked me what makes me the happiest, what makes me happy in life, and I said spending time with my family, spending time with Josh and the kids as a family. And my mum said, well, why can't you do that? And I said, because Avery is always upset. She doesn't enjoy anything. Now, at the time, it felt like that's what it was going to be like forever. But over time, especially with the right meds, Avery's mood got so much better. I mean, you guys have seen her. She is such a happy little girl. So as that kind of happened, my mood got better. I started to feel better. She started to sleep better. So I started to sleep better. And I felt like I had a little bit more life in me, and that kind of brings us to acceptance. Now, I do feel like I'm at a place where I kind of accept everything. I accept that this has happened. I accept that I can't change it, and I know that all I can do is encourage Avery to do the best that she can do. I have accepted that she may not walk. I have accepted that she may not eat. I have accepted that she may not develop to a point where normal children do develop. I have accepted that she will most likely always be severely disabled. I have accepted that, but that doesn't mean that I don't have hope. I still have hope that she will do all of these things. I've not completely written them all off. There is every chance that Avery will still be able to walk and talk and eat and do all of the other things that other children are able to do. It just may take her a lot more time, but I just feel like I am in such a better place now in terms of my mood and the way I think about things. Now, like I said, I feel like I definitely do kind of backtrack on this road a little bit, and again, I think that's normal. I don't think someone can be happy all of the time. There are certain triggers that will push me back down, but generally I can always kind of perk back up quite quickly because there's things that I've learned and there's things that I've been doing that have helped. One of those things is a diary. Now, when Avery was very small, just after she was discharged from hospital, my best friend gave me a couple of little gifts, one of those being like a diary, and it was kind of an alternative to a baby book really. And I sat down one evening while I was expressing, because I was expressing at the time, and I wrote about Avery's event. I wrote what happened, I wrote about her time in the hospital in a lot of detail, and then I just started to write about how I was feeling. I started to write about Avery's day, what new things she was doing, and it became a little bit of a journal. I don't write in it every day. I sometimes don't even write in it every week, but I do write in it, especially if Avery's done something new or if something big is happening. Like for example, when Avery had her G-tube surgery, I'll write in the diary how I'm feeling about it, what we're doing that day, how things have gone, what Avery's doing, what appointments she has, everything really. And it does help. It helps me get my emotions out a little bit. It helps me knowing that I've got this diary, I've got all of these words and all of these entries on things that have happened in the past. I can look back on those and see how far she's come, and I know that when Avery's older, I can read to her, I can read all of this to her, or she may even be able to read it herself and find out what her childhood was like or what her first couple of years were like, because I am very nearly finished with the book now. I think I've got literally about this much left to fill and then it will be done, but it's just a glance at Avery's first couple of years, and writing it for me has been helpful, but also knowing that Avery will have that to look back on and I will have that to look back on, just to see really how far she's come, because way back in the beginning a lot of those entries probably were negative, whereas now they are more positive. And it takes me back to when Avery was in the intensive care. They had this little journal thing, they gave me like a journal and they encouraged me to write in it, and I won't lie, I think I only wrote in it twice. But even now, looking back on that, I think, wow, look at the place that we were all in then and look at the place we're in now. It's night and day. It is so different. And then whenever I'm having a bad day and I feel like things aren't going to get any better, I look back at those early entries and I think, of course they can get better. At that time I thought it would never get any better, and look how far we've come since then. But it all takes time. I mean, you can probably see from the loss cycle that underneath it there is a big line that says time, and that is because that's what you have to allow yourself. It's not going to get better in a week, it's not going to get better in a month. It will slowly get better over time, to the point where you probably don't even notice the change in your mood. You don't notice the shift because it's happened so gradually. And I think, like I said, it takes being able to really look back to see how far you've come and see how much you've got to be grateful for. Alongside Avery's little ICU journey, I've also got a little box of things that she had in the ICU. So it's things that will always remind me of her time in the ICU, and I keep them all tucked away in a little box. Now and again I will pull that out, not very often, because I'm not gonna lie, it does make me very sad. Again, I don't think I'm at a point where I can look at that stuff and not feel sad and only feel grateful. I still feel very sad because I do get flashbacks, and that is something else that I want to talk about. PTSD is definitely something that can be attached to a trauma like this. Me in particular, for some reason, I don't know why, I don't know what triggers it, but for some reason sometimes my mind will take me back to the night of her event, and I will see the images in my head clear as day, exactly what it was like. And the way I found to help with that, again, there probably are much better coping mechanisms for this, but I feel like I do need to see a professional to learn those. But I will just take a deep breath and I will urge my brain to think about something else, anything else, and I'll just try and not think about it. That doesn't mean to say that I've completely closed the door on it. I don't think it's healthy to, you know, push it aside as though it never happened, because it did. But I find that if I'm talking to someone about it, it's much better than, you know, if it just creeps up on me when I'm alone and there's no one to talk to. So for me, just taking a really deep breath and urging my brain to think about anything else is what has been working for me so far. Now, I am an anxious person by nature, and although this is kind of a coping mechanism for me, I wouldn't say it's the healthiest coping mechanism. With anxiety, I like to keep busy. I'm not the kind of person that can sit still if I know there's something that needs to be done. As a matter of fact, I'm not the kind of person that can sit still very often at all. I feel like I always need to be doing something. I need to be fiddling with something, and even if there's nothing to be done, I will find something to be done, because if I'm moving and if I'm doing something and I've got focus on something else, my mind isn't going to wander, because I overthink. And when I overthink, I think about a lot of things that I don't need to put myself through that kind of stress, if that makes sense. I put a lot of stress on myself when I really don't need to, and it is purely because my mind wanders. So for me, keeping busy really helps. Now, Avery makes this 100% easy for me, because I am always busy, whether it's with housework or whether it's with therapies with Avery, or whether it's just spending time with Avery, getting the boys to school, not Eli at the moment, but homeschooling. I'm a very busy person, and that is the way I like it, because it helps me from overthinking, it keeps me grounded, it keeps me moving, it keeps me moving forward. It's the same with plans and planning. Now, one thing, and I know that this isn't something that is, you know, doable for everyone, it's not something that's realistic, but I do want to mention it because I definitely think it's played a massive role in helping. We booked our trip to Orlando when Avery was still less than 6 months old, and I had heard that the first couple of years are definitely the hardest when it comes to kind of navigating the trauma and the emotions and the feelings behind it, especially since, you know, it's kind of the 1 to 2 point mark where you really start to notice if your child has severe disabilities. Obviously, I'm very aware that Avery should be walking and talking by now. She's not, she is nowhere near, but we know that she was severely impacted. So it doesn't make it any easier, but again, I feel like I've come to accept these things. I'm thinking a lot more logically now, instead of letting my emotions rule the way I think. So we booked our trip to Orlando, and that has really given us something to look forward to. It's given us something to focus on. When we're having a bad day, we know we've still got that to look forward to. And even though I know in 3 months' time the trip will be over, I feel like it's really helped us get through the hardest time. And when we get back, who's to say we can't plan something else to look forward to? It certainly won't be Orlando, because I don't know if we'll ever be able to do that again. But I think it is always good to be able to plan something that is a bit of time ahead, so that you've got something to look forward to. It doesn't have to be big. It can be a party. Maybe someone's birthday's coming up. Like, for example, in Avery's first year, I always knew I wanted to christen her on her birthday, because her first birthday ideally fell on a Sunday. And for a long time I was putting all of my energy into planning that, and it just gives you something to focus on, it gives you something to look forward to, it gives you something to feel grateful for and feel excited for. And sometimes it's just about forcing some of those positive emotions to outweigh the negative ones, and I do definitely think that helps. Now, I'm going to start wrapping this up because I feel like I've just been yabbering on, and I also feel like a lot of it probably didn't make sense. I really hope it did. There There's one more thing I just want to mention because I think it's the most important thing, and it is the #1 thing that keeps me going, and that is Avery. Yes, she went through what she went through, but I can see her every day. I look at her and I see her smile, and she's happy and she's here. She 100% keeps me going in terms of the trauma surrounding her event, because she is here. That is a blessing. I am so very lucky, and it really helps me feel as though something wasn't taken away from me, because she's there, she's here, especially when she's smiling, especially when she's having a good day. I look at her face and she just reminds me of everything I have to feel grateful for, everything that I am lucky for. She could have very easily been taken away from us, and she wasn't, and for that I will be forever grateful. No matter how difficult life is, no matter how many challenges that we have to face, it is still a 1000 times better outcome than what could have happened. Ultimately, like I said, the reason I wanted to make this video is to share my emotions. I know there's a lot of other parents that would have gone through the same emotions, and I just wanted to let all of you know that it's okay. None of them are anything to feel bad about. None of them make you a bad person. It is completely normal, and you are 100% not alone. I urge anyone that's going through a hard time, or who has gone through these emotions or going through these emotions, to reach out to me. I always try to reply to comments and messages on Instagram. I'm not so good at comments on Instagram just because I do get a little bit overwhelmed, but I do try to reply to everyone's messages. And if not me, then like I said, there are some wonderful support groups on Facebook that have really helped me. And sometimes just listening to someone else's story, even if their journey is completely different to yours, just listening to other stories are really, really helpful, because no one's journey is the same. Every child is different, every brain injury is different, so even though stories may seem pretty similar to yours, nothing is identical, and there can be some that are on two ends of the spectrum, but either way, everyone's on the same journey, everyone's probably gone through the same emotions, everyone has felt what you're feeling, and it is normal and it's okay. And it's also okay to ask for help and admit that you're not okay. And with that said, I will see you guys in a few days with another video. Bye guys.